His name was Robert Smith. And that was already a problem, because if you have the most common name in the world expects nothing from you. He failed at 11 jobs, not because he was stupid, but because he was too honest in a world that sells illusions. They told him, "You're not motivating." And that became his main advantage. Because Robert never promised success. He just stopped lying. People started listening. Then they started quitting. Then they started changing their lives. And it was at this moment that Robert became most afraid, because he accidentally became what he never wanted to be, a symbol. And symbols have no right to be alive. The money came, the popularity came, but with them came the question, what if success is just a show? Robert Smith disappeared when everyone was expecting him to reach his peak, and he left behind only one rule. A rule that breaks the whole business of motivation. This is Smith's rule. And now you will hear why success is not what you think it is. Part 1. Robert Smith was never the main character. Robert Smith was born without any complications, and that, perhaps, was his first failure. The doctors didn't rush around. The nurses weren't fussing. No one said, "This child will change the world." One doctor just sighed and muttered, "Well, another one." That's how Robert Smith came into the world, a name so ordinary that it seemed as if it had been given by default. A childhood without a story. Robert grew up in a typical American suburb where all the houses looked like they had been copied from the same catalog, with only the color of the mailboxes changed. His father worked as a middle manager. He was a man who sincerely believed that the pinnacle of life was stable health insurance. His mother was kind, but she constantly said, "Don't stand out. It's dangerous to stand out." Robert listened, and he did it perfectly. School years. Master of invisibility. At school, Robert was not the worst, not the best, not interesting. He was background noise. Teachers called him Smith because it was easier that way. Sometimes, not the right Smith. During class, the teacher might say, "Robert, answer the question." Robert remained silent, because the question wasn't for him. First comedic triumph, which no one noticed. At the age of 9, Robert decided to become a magician. He performed a trick at a family celebration. He pulled a coin out from behind his uncle's ear. His uncle said, "Who did that?" Everyone looked at his uncle, not at Robert. The coin disappeared from history again, just like the dream. Adolescence. Attempts to be normal. Robert tried play soccer, baseball, guitar, debate. He didn't have a talent for failing epically. He just quit. The coaches said, "He has no fire." Robert didn't know what that meant. He just didn't want to shout to be noticed. The most important moment, which seemed like a trifle. At graduation, the school principal shook hands with everyone. He said to someone, "You're going places." To others, "We're proud of you." To Robert, he said, "Good luck, Robert." Without pause, without intonation. Robert nodded. And at that moment, something clicked. For the first time, he thought, what if I don't have to be someone great? It wasn't sad. It was a relief. At 18, Robert Smith left home with 2 suitcases, a cheap laptop, and absolutely no plan. He didn't want to conquer the world. He just wanted to live his life without interference. The world, in response, began to get in his way. On his first night in his tiny apartment, Robert lay on the floor, because he didn't have a bed yet, stared at the ceiling and thought, If no one expects anything from me, I can do anything, even accidentally succeed. He laughed, quietly, to himself. And he didn't even suspect that this was the first correct reaction in his life. Part 2. Robert Smith tried 11 jobs and failed at all of them. Robert Smith wasn't looking for a job. He was looking for proof that he was okay. A job seemed like the easiest way to prove it. Job 1. Retail, or smile even if you hate it. Robert's first job was at an electronics store. He wore a badge that said Robert, even though no one used it. Customers would say, "Hey, man." Robert would reply, "Sure." He didn't know what "sure" meant, but it sounded safe. He was fired 2 weeks later after he honestly told a customer, "If you need something reliable, don't buy this." The manager looked at him long and sadly. "You're not bad, Robert. You're just not retail." Job 2. Call center, where the soul dies. At the call center, Robert worked with a headset and a blank stare. The script required enthusiasm. Robert offered realism. "How are you today?" "Honestly, probably tired." The customers laughed. The supervisors did not. They told him, "You make people comfortable, but not profitable." That was the best description of his career. Job 3. Warehouse. Silence and boxes. At the warehouse, Robert finally found something rare. No one demanded that he be someone else. He just moved boxes. The boxes didn't expect motivation. But Robert started talking to them. Not out loud, inside. A month later, the manager said, "You work fine, but you look like you're thinking too much." He was transferred. It was a mistake. Job 4. Assistant, a person without a role. Robert became an assistant to a person who didn't know what he was doing. He typed letters that no one read. He wrote reports that no one needed. One day, his boss asked him, "What do you think we do here?" Robert answered honestly, "I think we pretend." There was silence for 14 seconds. Then he was fired, very politely. Question job 5. Startup, the Wi-Fi dream. The startup was young, loud, and pointless. Everyone said, "We're changing the world." Robert asked, "Which part?" After that, he was no longer invited to meetings. His task was to generate ideas. He generated one. What if people don't need our product? 3 days later, they wished him luck. Job 6. Delivery, loneliness on wheels. Robert delivered food. He was never late, and he was never happy. Once, a customer said, "You look like you know something." Robert replied, "I know this isn't it." The client gave him a tip. Manager, warning. Job 7. Bar, honesty after 10 p.m. Robert couldn't lie at the bar. "Is this cocktail good?" "It's confident." "Should I text my ex?" "Absolutely not." People listened. The bar didn't. The owner said, "You're killing my alcohol sales with emotional growth." Job 8. Gym, motivation that isn't there. Robert became a receptionist at a gym. He wasn't motivated. He sympathized. "Why aren't you working out?" "Because life is heavy enough." A month later, he was replaced by a poster. Job 9. Freelance, the illusion of freedom. Robert wrote texts, honest ones, too honest. The client said, "We want optimism, Robert replied, "Then you don't want reality. The reviews were great. Orders, no." Job 10. Temporary hope. Temporary work in a temporary office. No one knew his name, and that was almost nice. But one day, HR said, "You're very likable, Robert. We just don't know what to do with you." Robert nodded. So did he. Job 11. The last one. Before something. The 11th job ended without drama. Just a letter. "We've decided to move in a different direction." Robert thought, "Me too. I just don't know where." The moment between everything. That evening, Robert was sitting in the kitchen eating cold pizza when he suddenly laughed. Not hysterically, not sadly, sincerely. He realized he wasn't lazy, not stupid. He wasn't broken. He just didn't fit in where everyone else was trying to be someone else. Robert looked at his resume. 11 jobs, 0 careers. And for the first time, he thought, maybe I'm not the problem. Maybe I'm the format. The idea was ridiculous. That's why he believed in it. Part 3. The worst idea Robert Smith ever had, which, unfortunately, worked. Ideas come to people in different ways. For some, it's in the shower. For some, in the gym. For some, during their morning run. Robert Smith's idea came to him at 2:17 a.m., in the kitchen, with cold pizza and an empty bank account. This should have been cause for concern. A really bad idea. Robert sat at his old laptop and looked at ads for coaches, mentors, and motivational speakers. They all promised success, confidence, the life of your dreams. Robert felt physically exhausted. He muttered aloud, "What if people don't need motivation?" And then the most dangerous thing happened. He liked this idea. A concept that should not have existed. Robert opened a blank document and wrote the title, "Honest Advice You Didn't Ask For." Underneath it, he wrote his first text. "I don't know how to make you successful. I only know how not to lie. If that doesn't suit you, that's okay." He didn't plan a business. He didn't plan a brand. He didn't plan for the future. He just clicked publish. That was his worst professional habit. He never thought ahead. The first reader. The first comment appeared 4 hours later. This is depressing. Robert smiled. It was honest. Second comment. Finally, someone not selling me dreams. Robert frowned. That was dangerous. Third. I laughed. Then I felt attacked. Robert leaned back in his chair. Oh no, he thought. People like it. A random customer. A week later, Robert received an email. No subject line, no pleasantries. Can I pay you to tell me what's wrong with my life? Robert read the letter 3 times. Then he replied, I don't know what's wrong. I can only tell you what sounds fake. The reply came in a minute. That's perfect. The first session. They talked on video. The client was wearing a suit, an expensive one, a sad one. I hate my job, he said. Then why are you there? Robert asked. Because I worked my whole life to get it. That's not a reason, Robert said. That's sunk cost. Silence. The client didn't cry. He didn't scream. He breathed. No one ever said that to me. Robert replied, That's because it doesn't sell well. The reputation he didn't want. A month later, Robert had 7 clients, 0 business cards, 1 rule. No motivation, no slogans, no hope without reality. He told people, maybe you're not lazy, you're just living someone else's life. A dream you hate is not a dream. Success doesn't have to appeal to you. People laughed. Then they fell silent. Then they changed something. And that scared Robert. The first fear. One evening, he closed his laptop and thought, what if I'm accidentally doing something important? This thought was scarier than all the layoffs, because he knew how to cope with failure. But responsibility? No. The moment of truth. Small but real. Robert received a message. I quit my job today. Not because you told me to, but because you didn't stop me. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he wrote a new line in his document. I don't motivate. I just don't prevent people from being honest. And for the first time, he thought, maybe this is my job. Robert Smith started with the worst idea in the world. He didn't sell dreams. He didn't promise happiness. He didn't guarantee results. He sold the truth with humor. And to his surprise, was ready for it. Part 4. People started listening, and that was a problem. Robert Smith didn't wake up famous. He woke up tired. There were 37 messages on his phone, and none of them asked how he was doing. They were all asking for advice. It was a new feeling, uncomfortably warm. When you are quoted without permission. Someone posted Robert's quote on Twitter. You're not lost, you're just honest for the first time. It got thousands of likes. Robert looked at it and thought, I just said that to a person who was crying. His words now lived without him, and they behaved better than he did. The first fans. Awkward. People wrote, you saved my life. You're the only real one. Please don't ever change. The last one scared him the most. Because Robert knew, if someone asks you not to change, they no longer see you as alive. The first haters, as expected. Videos appeared. Why Robert Smith is dangerous. Articles. Honesty without responsibility. Comments. He's just bitter. Another failed man selling trauma. This isn't success. This is coping. Robert read everything. It was a mistake. The moment when humor doesn't save the day. One woman wrote, my husband left his job after watching you. Now we're struggling. Thanks. Robert stared at the screen longer than he wanted to. He replied, I'm sorry. I don't give instructions. I give permission. He didn't know if that was true, but it was honest. The invitation that ruined everything. He was invited to speak at a success conference. The pay was ridiculously high. The audience was thousands. The topic? How to find your true path. Robert reread the letter and thought, I don't know how to do that. He agreed. It was the second worst idea of his life. Scene. The light hurt his eyes. The presentation wouldn't open. The organizer whispered, just inspire them. Robert went out without a plan and said, I don't know why you're here. I don't know your purpose. And anyone who says they do is lying. Someone in the room laughed. Someone tensed up. Robert continued, success didn't fix me. It just made my anxiety louder. The silence became heavy. The turning point. Someone in the room stood up and left. Then another, and another. Robert thought, that's it. And then, applause. Not an explosion, no ecstasy. Slow, genuine. After the scene. Backstage, the organizer approached him. You scared people. Good, Robert replied. They were asleep. It sounded cocky, and he didn't like it. When success looks at you. That evening, Robert sat in his hotel room and looked out at the city. He thought, I didn't want this scale, but it found me. And for the first time, he didn't feel joy. Instead, he felt responsibility without instructions. People listened to Robert Smith, and that was the problem. Because he wasn't ready to be a leader, an example, the voice of a generation. He was simply a person who spoke the truth out loud. And the truth, as it turned out, doesn't scale very well. Part 5. Success turned out to be extremely inconvenient. Robert Smith didn't spend his first money on something sensible. He bought a new mattress. The old one creaked as if to remind him every night, you're only here temporarily. The new one was silent, and that was unsettling. When money doesn't make you happy. Robert checked his balance more often than he would like to admit. The number was real, stable, undeserved in his opinion. He thought, I didn't build anything, I just talked. The money didn't seem like a reward. It seemed like a responsibility with interest. A new reality. An agent appeared. An accountant appeared. Someone appeared who said, you need a brand. Robert asked, why? Because people want consistency. Robert thought, but I'm chaos. Content plan as a form of violence. They brought him a plan. 3 posts per week, 2 videos, 1 deep message. Robert looked at it as if it were a menu at a restaurant where everything tasted bad. What if I have nothing to say? Say something anyway. Robert didn't know how to do that. The insincerity he began to feel. One day he wrote a phrase that everyone liked and immediately hated it. Because it was correct, beautiful, painless, and absolutely not his. He deleted the post. The audience was offended. Meeting an old acquaintance. Robert accidentally ran into a former colleague from the call center. Man, you made it, he said. I don't know where it is, Robert replied. His colleague laughed. Just enjoy it. It was the worst advice ever. The first breakdown. One evening, Robert refused to do an interview. Then he refused to do a podcast. Then he refused another appearance. His team was nervous. People will forget you. That might be okay, Robert said. That didn't reassure anyone. A moment of silence. He went alone to a small town by the ocean. No announcements, no stories, without reason. He sat on the beach and thought, I didn't want success. I wanted honesty. And suddenly he realized, success isn't something that happens to you. It's what is now expected of you. Robert Smith achieved what others dream of, and he discovered that money does not determine identity. Popularity does not bring peace. And a brand can consume a person. He was faced with a choice he didn't want, to disappear or become someone he was not. And the worst part was, both options seemed like defeat. Part 6. The fall nobody was waiting for. Robert Smith's fall was not spectacular. There were no headlines, scandalous videos, tears on camera. There was silence. And silence is the most dangerous form of failure. The beginning of the end. Robert simply stopped responding. Not immediately, not abruptly. At first, an hour later, after a day, in a week. People asked, "Are you okay?" Robert didn't know how to respond. The interview that changed everything. He finally agreed to one interview. The host was polite. The questions were standard. "Do you see yourself as a role model?" Robert smiled. At first, he smiled nervously. "No," he said. "I see myself as a warning." It was meant to be a joke, but the camera loves simplicity, not context. The next morning, he saw, "Robert Smith, I am a warning." No smile, no explanation. Without him. Reaction. Comments were divided. Finally honest. "He's lost it. This is why you don't listen to broken people." Robert read everything. Again. He knew how it would end. And yet he didn't stop. The person who left. One of his first clients wrote, "You changed. You used to feel safe." Robert stared at the message for a long time. Then he replied, "I don't feel safe with myself anymore." There was no reply. Self-sabotage. Very professional. Robert started telling too much truth, without humor, without pauses. During his speech, he said, "If you're here to be inspired, you're wasting your time." People got up and left. This time, without applause. The lowest point. A hotel room. The light won't turn on. Robert sits on the floor and thinks, "I knew it. I never knew how to hold on to the good things." He felt no anger, only fatigue. Yes. The phone rang. His mother called. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," Robert replied. "That's okay," she said. "You were never good at pretending." He smiled, for the first time in a week. Closing. Robert canceled everything. The podcasts, scenes, interviews. He wrote one message. "I'm stepping away, not to fix myself, just to stop lying." No one reposted it. And that was right. Robert Smith fell, not because he was weak, but because he was honest in a world that loves simple versions of people. He didn't disappear as a hero, and not as a villain, but as a man who was tired of playing a role he never asked for. Part 7. The honest version of success nobody talks about. Robert Smith disappeared in a way that only those who are no longer expected. Without explanation, without explanations, without return. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't hurt. Life without a role. Robert moved to a small town where no one recognized him. There were no conferences. There were no brands. There were no questions about mission. There was a small house and silence that demanded nothing. The first week, he just slept. Meaningless work, and that's okay. Robert got a job at the library. Not as an expert, not as a coach, just arranging books. People didn't ask him his opinion about life. They asked him where the history section was. And that was a relief. The return of thoughts. One day, a guy approached him. "You look familiar." Robert tensed up. "You helped my sister,"
the guy said. She's alive and calmer. Robert nodded. Thanks, said the guy, and left. No selfies, no fuss. And that was enough.
Honesty without drama. Robert started writing again, not for publication, for himself. The phrases were simple. I don't want to be important. I want to be accurate. I confuse attention with meaning. He didn't teach it, and the texts got better. Small conversations. Sometimes people in the library would start talking about fatigue, about choices, about fear. Robert listened, and if he spoke, it was briefly. You're allowed to stop. It's okay to not know. No one is watching as closely as you think. People left feeling calmer, and it didn't require a stage. A new definition. One evening, Robert wrote in his notebook, "Success is not being heard. It's being able to hear yourself." He closed his notebook, and he didn't feel the urge to show it to anyone. Robert Smith did not return to success. He returned to himself. Without an audience, without loud words, without fear of disappearing. And for the first time in many years, he didn't think it was temporary. Part 8. Smith's Rule. Robert Smith never planned to leave a rule behind. He didn't like rules at all. Rules always sounded like someone else had already decided for you. But sometimes rules aren't made. They are noticed. How the Smith Rule came about. One day, someone left a note between the pages of a book in the library. You once said something that changed my life. I don't remember exactly what, but I remember how it felt. Robert read it several times. He didn't know the author, and he didn't want to know. He just wrote down in his notebook a phrase that had been with him for a long time. If something works only when everyone watches, it's not real. He didn't call it a rule, but it became one. What he no longer did. Robert no longer motivated, explained life, did not help become a better version. He ceased to be a function. And strangely enough, people began to become more honest without him. What remained? From time to time, someone recognized him. They didn't ask for advice. They didn't take pictures. They just nodded. It was better than applause. Smith's Rule, full version. Robert never published this, but it was passed on with slight variations. Here's how it sounded to him. Smith's Rule. If you have to become someone else to succeed, it's not success. It's a performance, and performances always end. A few years later, someone wrote a book, Smith's Rule, the anti-success philosophy. Robert found out about it by accident. He smiled. He closed the book. He put it on the philosophy shelf, without an autograph. Robert Smith closed the library. The lights went out. The city was quieting down. He walked home without feeling like he was missing anything. Because now he knew. Success isn't when people see you. It's when you don't need to hide.